Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the White House announcing 4 new trade deals with Latin American countries. And President Trump and the First Lady signing an order to expand opportunities for young people transitioning out of foster care. Mariotsu standing by with the latest. And the fight for control of the U.S. House continues as the Justice Department files a lawsuit targeting the state of California's new congressional map. Arlene Richards explains. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announces a bonus for TSA agents who went above and beyond during the government shutdown. Jason Blair has more on the announcement. And the government shutdown is officially over today after Congress reached a deal last night. What does this mean for Americans? And when will SNAP benefits and flights return to normal? David Lamb reports. And the Trump administration designates 4 violent left-wing Antifa groups based in Europe as foreign terrorist organizations.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kevin Hogan in for Tiffany Meyer. The White House announcing 4 new trade deals with Argentina, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Ecuador. And President Trump and the First Lady, Melania, signing an executive order to create new educational and employment opportunities for youth transitioning out of foster care. And we go now live to our NTD Washington correspondent, Mariotsu, who's at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What's the latest on the trade deals the White House announced?
Kevin, good evening. Yes, the White House is announcing 4 new framework deals with Latin American countries. This is coming as President Trump is planning to do a lot of domestic travel in anticipation of the 2026 midterms, where he plans to talk with voters about affordability. So according to a senior administration official, a 10% tariff will remain in place on goods coming from Argentina, El Salvador, and Guatemala, while goods coming from Ecuador will be tariffed at 15%. The administration official adds, though, that these deals will include tariff relief on products not grown domestically in the U.S., such as coffee, bananas, and cocoa. Meanwhile, President Trump and First Lady Melania today signed an executive order establishing the Fostering the Future program as part of the First Lady's Be Best initiative that she began in 2018. Take a look.
I predict this small spark today will ignite a profound and lasting nationwide movement. Our united resolve will foster a thriving future filled with compassion and innovation.
The First Lady headlining an executive order signing aimed at expanding opportunities for education, career development, and housing for youth transitioning out of the foster care system.
Under the Trump administration, we believe that every American child deserves a safe and loving home, and we're determined to support the amazing families who help make that happen. And we have some of those families in the room today, and I just want to thank you all for being in the White House. There is no place like this, and we want to thank you very much for being here.
The order directs HHS to modernize data and deploy AI for better caregiver matching while reallocating unused federal funds into trade school scholarships and demanding states include faith-based providers or risk losing funding.
What's your name is?
My name is Donald. The Bible tells us that one of the measures of any society is how it cares for vulnerable children and orphans.
Meanwhile, the BBC apologizes to President Trump for airing a documentary right before the 2024 presidential election that doctors his speech, making it appear that he incited violence. The BBC calls the edit unintentional, rejects compensation demands, and denies any basis for defamation. This comes as The Telegraph exposes another misleading BBC edit of the same speech on Newsnight in 2022. With President Trump saying he has to sue because the BBC defrauded the public.
Well, I think I have an obligation to do it because you can't allow people to do that. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical.
And Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon today is reacting to a BBC media post that shows that the U.S. Agency for International Development is BBC's #2 donor, accusing the network of defaming the president in exchange for funding. Kevin, back to you.
Very comprehensive roundup. Thank you for that, Mari, and certainly an empathetic move by the administration to help those coming out of foster care. Thank you. And the Justice Department today filed a lawsuit against the state of California over its Proposition 50 initiative to create new congressional districts. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
After California voters overwhelmingly approved Proposition 50, a constitutional amendment that changes the congressional boundaries to favor Democrats, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit Thursday to block it. Prop 50 was Governor Gavin Newsom's response to a similar Republican-led effort in Texas, where Republican-led lawmakers voted to redraw its districts with the potential of picking up 5 seats. The lawsuit, filed in a California federal court, accuses California of racial gerrymandering in violation of the Constitution. It states, quote, California's congressional redistricting map, Proposition 50, is racially gerrymandered in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a statement to the Associated Press, quote, California's redistricting scheme is a brazen power grab that tramples on civil rights and mocks the democratic process. With the lines redrawn, Democrats in California have a shot at winning 5 seats now held by Republicans in next year's midterm elections. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James asked a South Carolina judge to disqualify the interim U.S. attorney who brought the criminal cases against them. The judge appeared to have doubts about the attorney's appointment. Judge Cameron Curry, who's based in South Carolina, presided over the proceeding held in Virginia to avoid any conflicts for the Virginia judges. Curry expressed deep skepticism over whether the Justice Department's recently appointed prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, is eligible to take on that role. James and Comey argue Halligan was appointed after a previous U.S. attorney in the district had used up the temporary 120-day period allowed, and that Attorney General Pam Bondi doesn't have the authority to make back-to-back appointments. The Justice Department argues that even if Halligan is improperly serving in the role, the indictments should not be thrown out because they don't hinge on her holding the office. While it's unclear how the judge will ultimately rule, she is expected to decide before Thanksgiving. A ruling against the government could derail both indictments. And a search is underway for the person who allegedly tried to confront the U.S. attorney for New Jersey. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi says last night someone tried to confront Alina Habba. The person then destroyed property in Habba's office before taking off. Bondi said Habba is okay. In response to Bondi's post on X, Habba said she would not be intimidated by radical lunatics for doing her job. A suspect description has not been released. The FBI confirmed it is also taking part in the investigation. And while the Trump administration continues moving to increase deportations, the Border Patrol chief said record lows at the border have freed up resources for more inland operations. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says bonus checks will go out to TSA agents who worked during the government shutdown. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Border Patrol Chief Michael Banks says that because of, quote, unprecedented control on our southern border, more resources are available to carry out deportation operations around the country.
It has allowed us to expand and move those operations into the internal part of the United States and go after those individuals that were brought into this country, released, unvetted, mind you, into this country.
The Department of Homeland Security says that over 2 million illegal immigrants have been deported from the country since January. The agency touts a recent ICE operation in Florida, which yielded the arrest of 150 illegal immigrant sex offenders as a model for the rest of the nation. The DHS has been running an aggressive hiring campaign across all their departments to reach their deportation goals. Customs and Border Protection also opened up positions to retirees if they wish to rejoin at double pay. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announces $10,000 bonus checks to TSA workers who worked during the shutdown and, quote, stepped up and went above and beyond. Noem says we will be looking at every single TSA official that helped serve during this government shutdown and do what we can to recognize that and help them financially with a bonus check to get them and their family back on their feet. Noam estimates that tens of thousands of TSA agents will be eligible to receive the bonus checks, and that agents that worked will also receive back pay for the checks that they missed during the government shutdown. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
A Pennsylvania senator is recovering in the hospital after a fall near his home. A spokesperson shared on X that Senator John Fetterman felt lightheaded on a morning walk and fell on his face, suffering minor injuries. It was determined this was due to a ventricular fibrillation flare-up, which is a type of irregular heartbeat. The Democrat had a stroke during his campaign for Senate in 2022 and was also hospitalized the following year for feeling lightheaded. The spokesperson said Fetterman is well and opted to stay in the hospital so doctors could fine-tune his medications. Fetterman had this to say, making light of a very serious situation, that if you thought his face looked bad before, wait until you see it now. And many government employees haven't been getting paid during the government shutdown, but that's about to change as the government reopens. NTD's David Lamb has more on what to expect.
The federal government has reopened after President Trump signed a funding bill.
Today, we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion, because that's what it was. In just a moment, I'll sign a bill exactly like we asked Democrats to send us all along, many days ago.
On Wednesday, Congress reached the resolution bringing a close to the shutdown that lasted more than 40 days, the longest in U.S. history.
On this vote, the yeas are 222, the nays are 209. The bill is passed. The motion is adopted.
8 members of the Senate Democratic caucus and 6 Democratic representatives joined Republicans to pass the legislation. Government employees are coming back to work and able to receive regular paychecks. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said on CNN that most SNAP recipients should receive benefits by end of next week, providing relief to the almost 42 million people who stopped receiving the benefits this month. The Trump administration also withdrew its emergency application to the Supreme Court related to SNAP benefits.
We are immediately last night began moving out, making sure that the program continues unabated starting once the government reopened. And hopefully by the end of this week, most will receive it at the very latest on Monday.
As for flight disruptions, air traffic controllers continue to be needed as thousands of flights were canceled and delayed since the shutdown began. The FAA's flight reduction of 6% is still active. But American Airlines says it's ready to resume operations, and the Delta Airlines CEO says its operations will be back to normal by the weekend.
Once people start getting paid, and I know Secretary Duffy is committed to getting those paychecks out right away. So over the next couple of days, I think you'll see things starting to turn to normal.
Social Security operations have resumed as well. Recipients can check their applications and claim status online. During the government shutdown, the U.S. economy took a hit.
Our Council of Economic Advisors said that it cost about $15 billion a week, and it accumulates to maybe 1.5% of GDP when you account for multiplier effects. And their current estimate is that 60,000 Americans, not government workers, have lost their jobs because of the reduced economic output.
60,000 jobs were impacted, costing the nation $15 billion a week. This could cut Q4 GDP by 1.5%. David Lamb, NTD News.
Coming up, Luis Martinez brings us a closer look at why China, Russia, and Iran have a vested interest in the survival of the Venezuelan regime of Nicolas Maduro. For Beijing, the regime provides a gateway to the Western Hemisphere. The Department of War making it clear this is not acceptable for U.S. national security. Terrorists in the Gaza Strip hand over another body of a deceased hostage. Meanwhile, conflict continues in the West Bank as a mosque is reportedly set on fire. Jason Perry with the details. And the European Union doubles down on its desire to use Russian assets frozen by the West. Arian Pastar has why some EU officials warn that this might not be as easy as it seems. All that after the break. Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party has given the Venezuelan regime an economic lifeline as the Trump administration ramps up pressure on the foreign terrorist organization led by Nicolas Maduro. Our Washington correspondent has more on the story.
The Chinese Communist Party has announced a zero-tariff agreement with the Venezuelan regime on over 400 categories of products. The move throws an economic lifeline to the Venezuelan regime, which will allow them to buy Chinese products at discounted prices and would allow the Chinese Communist Party greater control over the South American country's economy.
Venezuela right now is a safe haven where Hezbollah, Hamas, the drug cartels, the Colombian guerrilla operate freely, and they are part of this liaison with the regime.
The CCP has lent over $60 billion to the Venezuelan regime over the past 2 decades. It has also endowed the Venezuelan National Guard with equipment to repress its citizenry, and it has built a ground satellite station in Venezuela, allowing the Chinese Communist Party a foothold in the Western Hemisphere.
It's been America first, peace through strength, common sense, revive the warrior ethos, rebuild the military, reestablish deterrence. We're going to defend the homeland. We're going to deter China. We're going to make sure our allies do their part in burden sharing, and we're going to revive the defense industrial base.
The Trump administration has zeroed in on the links in between the Venezuelan regime and the Chinese Communist Party and directed the Department of War to counter the malign influence stemming from foreign terrorist organizations operating from Venezuela and by the Venezuelan regime.
Now, imperialism is inventing an even more bizarre narrative. Since they cannot say that Maduro has weapons of mass destruction, since they cannot say that we have hidden biological or chemical weapons, they invent a bizarre narrative.
My advice to foreign terrorist organizations, do not get in a boat. I mean, if you're trafficking drugs to poison the American people, and we know you're from a designated terrorist organization, you're a foreign terrorist and a trafficker, we will find you and we will kill you.
The Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado, who is in hiding in Venezuela, has thanked the Trump administration for their support.
Finally, a leadership that is addressing this tragic situation in Venezuela that has been evolving for 26 years, as it should. We have been asked that this criminal structure be addressed using law enforcement.
This week, the USS Gerald S. Ford, the largest and most advanced aircraft carrier in the world, enters Southern Command's area of operation to support operations against foreign terrorist organizations in the region. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
As the trade truce with China takes shape, the U.S. is eyeing ways to combat China's dominance over rare earth and critical minerals. It's an issue that some describe as America's single greatest vulnerability. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
The bipartisan House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party is exposing an issue that's cost Americans jobs, businesses, and jeopardized our national security. Investigators released a new report this week. A key point is that China rose to dominance in the critical mineral arena not through fair competition, but through predatory practices. The CCP's goal is to deal a blow to Western economies. In the words of China Committee Chairman John Molinar, China has a loaded gun that is pointed at our economy, and we must act quickly. America relies on China for over 80% of its rare earths, which are needed to make products we use every day, from electronics to medical equipment to military and defense gear, you name it. This is a dependence by design that's been in the making for more than 3 decades.
The PRC developed this control over decades of careful planning and execution. In 1992, then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping famously said, "The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths."
China has long subsidized its own production and lured Western companies into collaboration, only to then cheat by selling products below market value. This put Western companies out of business. Though the impacts of this have become more evident during the U.S.-China trade war, officials have long known that this problem exists, some even describing it as our single greatest vulnerability.
We have known that China is able and willing to weaponize its chokehold on critical minerals against adversaries like the United States. Despite knowing these dangers, the U.S. is no closer to achieving critical mineral independence than we were 15 years ago.
To combat this, the Trump administration is preparing to appoint a critical minerals czar. The committee is also suggesting to create a strategic resource reserve that would be similar to the national oil reserves. Lawmakers are also eyeing critical minerals tax credits to try to boost more domestic production. Though a big piece of the equation here is how to expedite mining permits. This is usually an uphill battle because of pushback from environmental groups. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The Select Committee on the CCP will hold a hearing next week on this very topic to further expose the CCP's predatory practices and their impact on Americans. In the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad has returned another body, now confirmed to be that of a deceased hostage. Meanwhile, conflict in the West Bank continues as Israeli settlers are now accused of setting a mosque on fire in a Palestinian village. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
The imam of a mosque in the West Bank was seen searching through charred remains inside a mosque that was allegedly set on fire on Thursday. Local residents accused Israeli settlers of lighting the blaze.
When the worshippers came in the morning to perform the dawn prayer, they were surprised by a smell coming out from inside the mosque.
Upon arriving at the mosque at dawn, I found the mosque's door broken, fires set inside, and racist slogans spray-painted by groups of settlers.
Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, dispatched troops to the scene to investigate the incident. And in a statement, the Army said it condemns violence and will continue to safeguard security in the area. Tensions between Israeli settlers and Palestinians continue to remain high in the disputed territories of the West Bank. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked whether the recent violence in the West Bank will affect the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
Certainly there's some concern about events in the West Bank spilling over and creating an effect that could undermine what we're doing in Gaza. We don't expect it to. We'll do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen.
The IDF said that in recent operations, they've detained over 50 terrorists in the West Bank and said they were later transferred to the Israel Security Agency for further questioning. Also on Thursday, Israel's foreign ministry posted a clip on X of a former hostage who recently spoke at the United Nations Committee Against Torture. She said after she was taken captive on October 7th and forced into a tunnel in the Gaza Strip, Hamas terrorists zip-tied the hands of a boy she knew from her community.
While we were sitting there, he was full of blood. We were full of blood. And when he came to take it off him, with the cutter, he cut his hand with the zip tie. I'll never ever forget that moment. I wanted to scream while I could see the Hamas terrorist smile.
Other parts of her testimony are too graphic to share. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist handed over another body to the Red Cross, said to be that of a deceased hostage. And Israel's National Institute for Forensic Medicine has identified it as the body of deceased hostage Minnie Godard. That now leaves the bodies of 3 hostages remaining in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The European Union doubles down on its desire to use Russian assets frozen by the West. But some EU officials suggest it's not as easy as it might seem. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Pastar, has the latest.
And we will cover the financial needs of Ukraine for the next 2 years. The discussion is now on the how.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the EU will definitely cover Ukraine's financial needs, which includes defense and economy. The bloc is working on different ways for that funding. The desired option is still using the profits from Russian assets frozen in the West. Von der Leyen explained how this would work.
So this would mean take the cash balances from the immobilized Russian assets, hand them as a loan to Ukraine, and Ukraine has to pay back this loan if Russia pays back reparations.
But Belgium, where most of Russia's funds are actually being held, is still against the idea. The country says using Russia's funds could pose a risk to Belgium. Some EU officials are calling on the Commission to listen to and respect Belgium's concerns.
Obviously, there are risks to be addressed, and specifically in case of Belgium, obviously there needs to be solidarity on those risks needs to be shared.
There are two other options to fund Ukraine's financial needs. One would be for the EU to use headroom in its budget to raise capital. And the other option would be an agreement among member states to raise capital by themselves. But von der Leyen says using profits from frozen Russian assets would be the best option, according to her. Meanwhile, in Romania, NATO members from across Europe are taking part in a joint military exercise. They're testing their ability to come to the defense of countries on NATO's eastern flank. NATO says the exercises are defensive in nature. Romania borders Ukraine, which has been battling a Russian invasion since 2022. And in Russia on Thursday, the Kremlin commenting on statements made by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. After months of failed negotiations, Rubio said that he doesn't believe Russia truly wants peace.
Russia is open to resolving the Ukrainian problem through political and diplomatic means. But while the doors to this are closed by the Kiev regime, we continue the special military operation.
The spokesman also replied to comments made by Kiev, which said that Ukraine stopped talks with Russia. The Kremlin warns that Ukraine's position at possible peace talks will worsen as Russia continues the fighting. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Stay with us. The Trump administration has designated 4 violent left-wing Antifa groups based in Europe as foreign terrorist organizations. Foreign policy analyst and former career diplomat Bart Marcois joins us to discuss the impact of the move when we come back. It's good to have you back with us. In a significant development today, the U.S. State Department has designated 4 Antifa-linked groups as foreign terrorist organizations. The department says the groups have, quote, waged terror campaigns in the United States and Europe, conspiring to undermine the foundations of Western civilization through their brutal attacks. Here are the 4 groups. Germany's Antifa Ost, known for hammer attacks on civilians. Italy's International Revolutionary Front, who sent bombs to politicians, embassies, and civilians, causing injuries. Greece's Armed Proletarian Justice, which pledges war on cops and state. And another group in Greece called Revolutionary Class Self-Defense. Let's get some deeper insight into the workings of Antifa and the impact of this designation from Bart Marcois, a foreign policy analyst and former career diplomat. Bart, thanks for your time this evening. This move means the administration can target any financial support in the U.S. for these Antifa groups. So what practical steps to tamp down on this violence can come from these designations?
Yeah, it targets not just financial support, but also material support, which means labor and activities in furtherance of the goals of these groups. It means that some 20-something-year-old who just has been caught up in a socialist craze and is swept along by this could be charged with giving aid and comfort to a foreign terrorist organization and face prison terms of 20 years or more. It means that if you're out there organizing riots and protests in cooperation with these organizations, you can be charged with that. It opens the door for charging with federal crimes, charging people who are fomenting riots in the United States or helping these groups foment riots overseas. Means you could be deported, you could be imprisoned. It really hits at people that support these groups, including the domestic Antifa protesters.
Very good to understand that. Stiff punishment to fit the crime. Now, these 2 Antifa networks are in Greece. They're allegedly planting bombs outside riot police and Labor Department buildings. How do these groups form?
They come in, most of them have come in from overseas. They're not native Greeks that are doing this. There are some native Greeks that are involved, but Many of them are being influenced by a lot of the Palestinian refugees that are coming into the country. They will set off their bombs and say this is done in solidarity with a Palestinian organization. Greece is the soft underbelly of illegal immigration into the EU, into the rest of Europe. It's an island nation with islands everywhere, and people will come in boats and they'll land on the shores. And anybody who has vacationed in Greece in the last 5 years will tell stories of sitting on the beach at some tourist resort and suddenly seeing a boat come up and 20 or 30 young military-aged men jump out of the boat and run off out of the sea and up onto the beach and disappear into the towns. There are probably close to 1 million so-called refugees in Greece, and once they establish themselves there, they move northward to try to get jobs and generous social benefits from Germany, from France, and then crossing the channel into Britain. Greece is where they come in. And the EU is really, really upset with Greece for not stemming this tide.
Fascinating hearing you track down exactly the origins of these. And, I'm listening to what you're saying and watching that footage, too. I mean, you see fires, absolute mayhem. A little context. Former FBI Director Christopher Wray said Antifa is more of an ideology, not an organization. It's clear ideology does not hit civilians with hammers, nor does it plant bombs, and an ideology doesn't have a flag bearing its insignia. That's more indicative of groups of people who have a common goal, a violent one. Can you give us some clarity on what Antifa is and how you think it should be dealt with?
Yes, and Christopher Wray could not have been more wrong. It's true that it is an ideology, but it is not true that it is not an organization. It's just that the organization it has been kept more loose and a little bit less easily identifiable. He said that so that he would not have to devote resources to chasing it down. But yes, it is an organization. They are transferring money. They're receiving money from, you name any country, any organization that hates the United States, that wants to combat Western civilization, and they are funding Antifa organizations, Antifa groups. They're grouped together in small groups, small contingents, but they receive money, they distribute money. The hammers come from somewhere. The wildfires are started by people in an organized manner. All the wildfires that took place in Israel, in Greece, in California, throughout Europe, these were people taking advantage of hot weather, windy weather situations and going out and setting fires by arson. Much of that was done by Antifa-linked organizations simply to create mayhem and to sow difficulty for Western countries. They are very much funded. China is probably funding them. I can't prove it, but I see indications there that China is sending money to groups that are involved in this. Any criminal organization that has political goals will wind up getting money from China, Iran, some of the other bad actors out there.
Right, Bart, the money trail is definitely one big part of this, and they're very coordinated. You see the formations of Black Bloc, and also, they have specializations. Like the ones in Greece, some only target infrastructure or buildings, others only target people. So let's delve further into the finances, though. Public Dispatch reports that while Antifa is often described as this patchwork of anarchists and violent activists, it actually has a deep and sophisticated financial structure propping it up that you were alluding to. Everything from travel funds to move members between cities, to crowdfunding to cover bail, medical expenses, equipment. The report cites an investigation that tracks these shadow funds. So how can governments like the U.S. and those of European nations rein those in?
They can start at the bottom by simply arresting the participants and holding them, rather than doing what the American government and so many state and city governments have done for the last 6 years, which is just arrest them, hold them overnight, and let them go. They've been treating them as if these are, student protests from the 1960s, protesting the Vietnam War. But they are hardcore, battle-hardened soldiers, foot soldiers, in a battle for civilization. They should be held. Their personal finances should be investigated. It's not that hard to trace the origins of the money. It's not like they're getting it in bags of cash and paper Trader Joe's bags. They are getting it through Venmo and through Telegram, through other electronic transfers. All they have to do is start tracing those money transfers to them. And as you say, they're carefully coordinated. It's not a coincidence that they all wear the same thing and that they all show up in one city after another. It's not like they live in Portland forever. They go to Portland when it's hot there. They go to Seattle when it's hot there. They move to San Francisco. Ask Andy No whether he thinks this is a benign movement of college students. They go to any college campus where somebody is speaking that they want to shut down. They want to quell somebody's free speech, and they are deadly violent. And they're even more violent in Europe than they are here.
And of course, that horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk in September, in which there was the Antifa inscriptions listed on those bullets. Bart McCoys, thanks for joining us and giving us this important insight.
Thank you for having me.
And with 4 Europe-based Antifa groups designated as foreign terrorist organizations, what tools does this give the Trump administration? For more analysis, hear from Jason Palmer and Denise Gitsham tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And stay with us. Senators hold a field hearing in Pacific Palisades, California, on the deadly January wildfire that destroyed homes and killed 12. Survivors say government failures and insurance problems left many unable to rebuild. Christina Corona has the key takeaways. And in baseball, Shohei Ohtani is a shoo-in to win the National League MVP. But the American League award is much less certain. Dave Martin joins us to discuss in a moment. Hi, thanks for staying with us. 2 Republican senators held a congressional field hearing in Pacific Palisades, California, listening to victims of the January 7th wildfire. The hearing, which focused on government response and insurance challenges, came nearly 10 months after the fire devastated the community. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
On Thursday, Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson led a field hearing in California on the aftermath of the Palisades fire. The January 7th blaze caused billions in property damage and claimed 12 lives.
I believe the Palisades fire was more than just a horrific tragedy. It was an unacceptable failure of government to protect the lives and property of its citizens. And we all know that this fire hurt our seniors more than anyone else.
Survivors and local leaders say their concerns have not yet been fully addressed.
On the day of the Pacific Palisades fire, reservoirs were empty. Fire hydrants went dry, and innocent people, including many vulnerable seniors, perished, while thousands more lost their homes, businesses, and everything they owned.
Lawmakers heard from residents and business owners to examine gaps in government response and preparedness. One resident said the fire department told him why they couldn't save his home.
John, we couldn't have saved your house or the block or the area. Our hydrants weren't working, and each truck holds 500 gallons of water. He said 500 gallons of water doesn't go very far.
He said guards and residents were using water from swimming pools, doing everything they could to put out sparks as the fire spread. Another resident said she never received alerts to evacuate. She stayed behind making calls through the night to help seniors and others at risk.
Seniors with mobility issues, those dependent on oxygen, residents with dementia who needed assistance. They all lost precious hours because of inadequate warnings.
Palisades resident Bruce Schwartz said State Farm dropped his insurance in October 2024. Just 76 days later, 17 of the 25 homes in his community burned down.
We were so severely underinsured that rebuilding required an affirmative vote of 75% of our homeowners.
He said the vote failed because some homeowners whose property survived refused to fund rebuilding for those who lost everything.
So now we have no home and no right even to rebuild one. To make matters worse, some of my neighbors will be forced to surrender their home to their lenders.
Other residents were dropped by their insurance after the fire.
Lots of residents found out after the fire that their policies had been dropped, and I was one of them.
Afterwards?
After the fire.
While nothing can undo the damage done by the Pacific Palisades fire, I am committed to advocating for the victims, their families, and this community to get answers and make sure this never happens anywhere in our great country ever again.
On Thursday, Los Angeles County announced they've launched an investigation into State Farm's handling of the Palisades and Eaton fire claims, focusing on potential violations of California's unfair competition law. This comes after complaints of delays, underpayments, and denied claims. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, I'm ready for the rundown. Let's start in baseball as newly awarded Cy Young winner Paul Skenes refuted a report yesterday that he told teammates he'd like to be traded. Would it be a surprise, though, if he was to be traded?
I mean, it would only be a surprise if it happened right now, really. That's only because he's under contract for at least four more seasons in Pittsburgh. He can't become a free agent until after 2029. Generally speaking, you know, when a team knows it's going to be tough to sign one of the young stars for a long-term deal, they usually wait until the player is less than 2 years from free agency until trading them. It can really hurt the fan base if you trade them this early. Plus, I think the return they would want for 4 years of team control would be ginormous. That would be tough for any team to pay. But the Pirates face hurdles definitely in keeping Skenes long-term. One is that they're really not winning. I mean, they finished last place in both of the Skenes' seasons. Generally, players want to play for a winner. And with the Pirates, just 4 winning seasons since 1993. It's not very much. Another, though, payroll, too. Skenes, if he hit free agency right now, he'd probably be looking at a $40 million a year salary to start off, and that's on the low end. Meanwhile, the Pirates' team payroll to start 2025 was just $87 million. Seems very unlikely they would devote like half their payroll to just one player, and the rest get, you know, $42 million or $47 million to split among the remaining $47 million. That seems very unlikely. So they're definitely the Pirates are definitely one of those small market teams that are gonna face hurdles in keeping this young star here.
Well, Dave, let's stay in baseball. I mean, MVPs are going to soon be announced. It seems a foregone conclusion that Shohei Ohtani will be in the National League award, but the American League is much less certain.
Yes, for sure. Now, the 3 finalists in the American League, Aaron Judge, Cal Raleigh, and Jose Ramirez, all 3 had great seasons. Most of us believe it's going to come down to Judge versus Raleigh. And really, Judge was probably leading in everyone's minds until that midseason elbow injury that cost him a couple weeks. Now, he still ended up leading all hitters in baseball in batting average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage, and a number of advanced metrics. But Raleigh beat him in home runs. I remember saying in those final weeks, if Raleigh could somehow get to 60 home runs, which seemed unlikely at the time, he should definitely be in the conversation for MVP. He ended up getting hot and it finished with exactly 60 there. Ultimately, I still think Judge is going to win. Although sometimes if you've won it multiple times like Judge has, I don't know, the voters kind of raise the bar for you like they did with Michael Jordan in the 1990s. In any case, the winners will be announced at the top of the hour, so just in a few minutes here.
Well, David, meanwhile, Cleveland Guardians all-star pitcher Emmanuel Clase was in court today. He had charges related to sports gambling. I mean, what's the latest on this?
Yeah, Clase pleaded not guilty to charges that he took bribes to help gamblers win bets on some of his pitches. Now, his teammate, Luis Ortiz, pled not guilty to the same charges yesterday. Both are due back in court on December 2nd. Now, prosecutors allege these two took thousands of dollars to help some bettors win nearly $500,000 while betting on the speed and the outcome of some of their pitches. Now, they said that Clase usually threw the allegedly rigged pitches, on the first pitch of the at-bat with the ball, usually well outside the strike zone. Clase's attorney said his client has maintained his innocence. Clase and Ortiz face up to 65 years in prison on these charges. And baseball will undoubtedly do their own investigation. If they find them guilty, regardless of whether the feds do or not, they could face expulsion, permanent ban from the league, regardless of the outcome. So it's big charges here.
Well, absolutely, Dave. Now let's shift gears to the NFL. The last place New York Jets play the first place New England Patriots tonight on Thursday Night Football. Realistically, what kind of chance do the Jets have to pull the upset?
Well, as a Jets fan, I can say not very good. At least for the Jets, they don't have to look at the other sideline and see Bill Belichick over there or Tom Brady anymore. I mean, those two definitely had their way with the Jets. New York has actually taken 2 of the last 3 games in this series between these two rivals. Before that, though, the Patriots had taken 23 of the last 25 games dating back to 2011. And now the Patriots, they look like they've found their successor to Tom Brady in Drake May. The young quarterback ranks in the top 5 in numerous passing categories, including passing yards and touchdowns. The Jets, meanwhile, last in passing yards per game this season. Now, head coach Aaron Glenn has not said which quarterback will start tonight, whether it be Justin Fields or Tyrone Taylor. Whoever it is, though, will be without starting wide receiver Garrett Wilson, who's injured. Now, the Patriots, heavy favorites tonight, 13.5-point favorites at home. The game starts 8:15 Eastern time and will be on Amazon Prime.
All right, Jets have to bring it.
They got to bring it for sure.
Dave Martin, thank you for the awesome update.
Thanks, Kevin.
And Shenyang Performing Arts has dazzled audiences worldwide with the extraordinary skill and grace of its classical Chinese dancers. Now, for a limited time, viewers have a rare chance to see what makes their performances so breathtaking in a special Mid-Autumn Festival Technique showcase premiering November 15th on the video platform Ganjing World. Here's an early look. You can watch the exclusive premiere on November 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern on Ganjing World. And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kevin Hogan. Good night.